YouTubers, this is Nurse J at Nursing the Truth, and I hope everyone is having a great Wednesday, hump day. Well, Nurse J has a lot of information to go over today. But first of all, I'd like to start with saying thank you to my new subscribers. Thank you for the wonderful, nice comments that I've been getting, and I hope that I've been answering your questions that you have been writing to me. Well, a lot of people don't really possibly believe that I might research as much as I do, but let me show you some things that I've already read, I've already researched, and I have printed off this much of information along with what I'm going to be reading to you today, plus multiple books on ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, Samaria, Assyria, and Babylon. Plus, reading online and looking up documents. Some of the books that Nurse J has read that is very critical for your information to learn is the Nag Hammadi Scriptures, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Kabbalion by the Three Initiates. And I'm going to turn around and look at my library behind me and also give you some others. The Wisdom of the Kabbalah, the Sirius Connection, the Holy Blood, Holy Grail series by Lynn Pickett. You can read the 101 Myths of the Bible by Gary Greenberg. You can read The Birth of Christianity and The Invention of Jesus. And you can also read Ralph Ellis's books as well. You can also pick up the book Peace, O Christ. You can also pick up a book called The Bloodline of the Gods by Nick Redfern. And another good author to read is David Icke's books as well. So, there to start off, Truth Seekers. Nurse J is giving it to you like she always does. And if you can't handle the truth, I'm sorry, my friends. You might need to get off my channel. So, what am I going to bring to you today? Well, if you get the book Peace, O Christ by Roman Piso, and you can look this up on your internet. You know, Josephus is the only one that wrote the history of the Jewish war and the antiquities of the Jews. Everyone else had to pull from his work. Now, let's backtrack a little bit. Philo of Alexandria was there, you know, a contemporary of Josephus, but he died before the Jewish-Rome war broke out. So, there again. Josephus is the fat cat of the day. And everyone, and I mean everyone, had to pull from that. So, what are the striking parallels between Josephus's works that crept into the New Testament? You see, in the Peace, O Christ book, it talks about that actually Josephus, that was his pen name. You see, Josephus Titus Flavius. You see, he tells us, oh, I was adopted by Rome and Vespasian, and I got a nice fat pad, and I wrote books. And I got a very good pension. But he went by a lot of pen names. Because you see, even when I read into the Antiquities of Jews, he put a lot of stuff in there that was a lie straight from hell if there is one. Okay? So if you're a Jew and you're writing as a Jew and you believe there's one God, then why in your Antiquities of the Jews are you writing in Greek gods. And you're saying that your people is of the Hyksos that actually invaded Egypt. Okay, enough of that. Check that out for yourself. So, in Luke 13, 1 and 2, we have this temple riot thing going on. And it says, and at the very time there were some present who told him about the Galileans, whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. He asked them, do you think that because these Galileans suffered in this way, they were worse sinners than other Galileans? Well, Pilate was not alone in his severity towards the Jews. He hated them. There was an incident under Cumanus when the temple was polluted with the people's blood. An incident which fits the circumstances of Cumanus' rule, which was in 48 to 52 CE. Much better than those of Pilate's, that he was in there from 26 to 36 CE. And they had to get rid of him because he killed so many people, they didn't have enough timber to crucify, and they had to go to Lebanon and import it. He was crucifying hundreds every day. Pilate's incident took place at his tribunal, not in the temple. The record of the tribunal incident was in the Antiquities of the Jews, book 19, 3.2. Only under Cumanus do we find such an incident in the temple as described in Luke. Now, Josephus gives us two accounts of the incident under Cumanus in the war, 2.12.1, and again in the Antiquities of 20.5.3. And that talks about that now while under the Jewish affairs were under the administrators of Cumanus, there happened a great tumult at the city of Jerusalem, and many of the Jews perished therein, when that feast, which is called the Passover, was at hand, and a great multitude was gathered together from all parts to that feast. Cumanus was afraid lest some attempt of innovation should be made by them. So he ordered one regiment of the army should take their arms and stand in the temple cloisters to repress any attempts at innovation. But when he could not induce them to be quiet, for they still went in on their approaches to him, he gave the order that the whole army should take their entire armor and come to Antonia, which was a fortress, as we have already said, which was overlooked the temple. But when the multitude saw the soldiers there, they were frightened at them and ran away hastily. But as the passages out were but narrow, and as they thought their enemies were following them, they were crowded together in their flight. There is yet another incident where the altar was sprinkled with the sacrificers' blood. During the last year of the siege, the various factions fought with one another. One faction held the temple, while the stronger faction held the city. The faction in the city had catapults and other weapon throwers to attack the defenders in the temple. And some of these projectiles overshot the walls and landed on the priests sacrificing at the altar, mixing their own blood with the sacrifices. That was in the war of the Jews. Now, remember the cleansing of the den of robbers in the Bible, where Jesus cleansed the temple of the money changers. Who needed the money changers? Foreigners, Gentiles, not the naive Jews. Could it be that Jesus was acting against the introduction of Gentiles into the temple worship? The Gospel of John differs from the Synoptics, not only in the timing of the incident, that he has Jesus railing against the merchants, not robbers. This is interpreted that Jesus thought the mercantile pursuits should not be pursued in the Holy Temple. When the biblical Jesus cleansed the temple of merchants, he quoted the following from Jeremiah 7:11. Jeremiah was railing against foreign worship being introduced in the temple. That means other people bringing their stuff in to their temple. Do you take this temple that bears my name for a robber's den? One of Josephus's Jesus's thinking of the same quote when he saw that the zealots of the Jewish and Rome War had taken over the sanctuary. That is in the Roman Jew War book 4.4.3, page 531, and it says, accordingly Jesus, this is in Josephus's book, accordingly Jesus, the eldest of the high priests next to Ananus, stood up on the tower that was against them, and thus said, they are robbers, who by their prodigious wickedness have profaned this most sacred floor, and who are to be now seen drinking themselves drunk in the sanctuary. See, Josephus wrote about 19 Jesuses, but you got to understand they were called Joshua, okay? I've already went to that long explanation. You cannot get Jesus from Hebrew. Now, the synoptics have another Jesus using the same quotation in the temple in Matthew 21:10, Mark 11:11, and Luke 19:45, saying, it is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of robbers. You see, they pulled from Josephus's book. If not they pulled from Josephus's book, Josephus had his hand in this. And or family when they wrote this. All from Jeremiah through Josephus to the synoptics use the Greek word astai for robbers, which applies, or lestes, which applies particular to insurrectionists rather than thieves of the common sort. So when you read in your Bibles, robbers, you're thinking, oh, they're robbing people, dude. They're like taking their change bag, right? No. That's insurrectionists. That is rebels with a cause. They're wanting to overtake Rome from Judea. And it says, Josephus's work in his life, his book that he wrote called Life of Josephus, 41, says, the Jesus of Josephus's account is a friend of Josephus. When he was in trouble with his command in Galilee, it was Jesus who informed Josephus of his impending problem. And Josephus says, my information reached me in a letter from my father, to whom the news was confided by Jesus, son of Gamaliel, an intimate friend of mine who had been present at the conference. The death of Jesus grieved Josephus more than any other, excepting that of his father and mother who died in prison during the siege. He was the one who, with Ananus, was murdered by the zealots at the beginning of the war. Remember, Jesus, I just read to you, was standing there inside the sanctuary saying that these insurrectionists, by their wickedness, had profaned the floor, and now they're in here drinking themselves drunk. This is the same Jesus that Josephus is talking about. That when he died, he was murdered by the zealots. Josephus says in his book of the Roman and Jew War 4.5.2, page 534, he says Jesus was also joined with him, Ananias, and although he was inferior to him upon comparison, he was superior to the rest. And I cannot but think that it was because God had doomed the city to destruction as a polluted city. You see, in the Bible, you have Caiaphas and Ananias, the two high priests. You see, there's a lot of players in this New Testament that actually are historical people. I mean, we have Drusilla, we have Felix, we have Agrippa, we have Herod the Great, we have all of his sons, Philip the Tetrarch, his other son Herod, Antipas, we have the Herodians, we have Aquila, and Paul is actually Saul, the brother of Costobarus, which is a Herodian. See, they made this stuff up so much that you have to go hunt through books and antiquity to find what the hell is going on. And it, my friends, is a masterpiece. This dying and rising God is a hoax. It is nothing but the crossing of the equinoxes and the sun, S-U-N, at the lowest point in June and reaches its highest point, the risen sun of December 25th. Okay, now, throughout his account of the war, Josephus labels the zealots and other nationalist brigades or robbers. It was this element that brought the destruction upon the country through their rebellious actions that the Gospels use the same term as more than a coincidence. They are following Josephus's quotation from Jeremiah. Jesus is cursing at merchants. Why should he call them insurrectionists? Now, the governor Petronius of all the Romans was a highly respected by the Jews for his action at great risk to his own life to preserve the sanctity of their temple. During the reign of Caligula, who really thought he was a god, Petronius stalled in putting a statue of the emperor in the Jewish temple. He was fortunate that Caligula was assassinated before the order for the emperor for Petronius to commit suicide arrived. Now, in the War Book of 2.10.4, Josephus says, Petronius replied, "And am not I also bound to keep the laws of my own Lord? For I am under command as well as you." So he was under the command of his Lord Caligula, just as the Jews were quote unquote under their law of their Lord. And the centurion in the gospel story is highly respected by the local Jews for his contributions to their synagogue. And this is in Luke 7:6. And it says, "And Jesus went with them. But when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to say to him, 'Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore I did not presume to come to you, but only speak the word and let my servant be healed. For I also am a man under authority, with soldiers under me, and I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my slave, do this, and the slave does it.' When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him, and turning to the crowd that followed him and said, 'I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith.'" The only Romans we meet in the Gospels are friendly converts to kindly rulers. Pilate, who could find no wrong in Jesus, which we know that was a farce because he was a cruel man. The centurion at the crucifixion who called Jesus Son of God. And Felix, the governor, who was so friendly to Saul. Now, in the Antiquities of the Jews, 20.9.3, page 424, Josephus writes about the Sicarii. They're called the dagger men. They have little daggers underneath their cloaks, and they'll kill you and don't even think twice about it, especially in large crowds and festivals. And it says, but now the Sicarii went into the city by night, just before the festival, which was now at hand, and took the scribe belonging to the governor of the temple, whose name was Eleazar, who was the son of Ananias, the high priest. See that name again? Ananias. And bound him and carried him away with them, after which they sent to Ananias and said that they would send the scribe to him, if he would persuade Albinus, the Roman governor, to release 10 of those prisoners which he had caught of their party. So Ananias was plainly forced to persuade Albinus and gain respect of him. Now, there are only 2 accounts in the literature of the period where a rebel or rebels from the Roman Empire were freed without a bribe. There is no independent reference to a practice of the Romans releasing a rebel for a Jewish or any other festival. You better believe that. You better believe that, and you better take your Bible to your sweet little precious 10%er pastor preacher. You better pull the laws, baby. Show them. It's a lie. Preaching that. There is another mention in Josephus of a Roman governor releasing minor offenders for a bribe at the end of his term of office. However, he executed all the other prisoners held on serious charges. This certainly would not apply in the Barabbas incident, as portrayed in the Synoptics. The Sicarii, on the other hand, were represented in Josephus as well as disciplined extortionists. They managed to get their own assassins out of Roman custody. Remember, Jesus had a Sicarii as a disciple, Judas Iscariot, who met an obscure death. In the Sicarii who released the son of the high priest, the son of the father, Barabbas, not the Romans, they released the Sicarii. Which we know in the story of Barabbas, Philo of Alexandria talked about a real man named Barabbas that was a madman and would walk in the streets naked, and they, showed him at the high place above everybody. And go watch my video on that. Crucifixion of 3 men and the survival of 1. The only person known in history, listen to this, documented, people, listen with ears. The only person known in history to survive a Roman crucifixion is a friend who Josephus saves after intervening with the Roman commander. 3 are taken down and 1 survives. This is written in Josephus's life, page 20. And it says, as I came back, I saw many captives crucified and remembered thee of them as my former acquaintance. I was very sorry at this in my mind and went with tears in my eyes to Titus and told him of them. So he immediately commanded them to be taken down and to have the greatest care taken of them in order to their recovery. Yet 2 of them died under the physician's hands, while the third recovered. You see, the Gospels have a mysterious Joseph of Arimathea appear to go to the Roman commander and ask for Jesus to be taken down among the 3 crucified. And Jesus lives, and the other 2 presumably die. And in Mark 15, it said, and when evening had come, and since it was the day of preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council, who was also himself waiting expectantly for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate wondered if he had already died, because see, it took days for people to die on the cross. It could take up to a week. And then they would let the vultures and birds eat your ass. And then when you were like bones and crap, they would just throw you in a mass grave. There was no proper burial, people. He asked him whether he'd be dead for some time. When he learned from the centurion that he was dead, he granted the body to Joseph. Then Joseph bought a linen cloth, and taking down the body, wrapped it in the linen cloth and laid it in a tomb that had been hewn out of the rock. He then rolled a stone against the door of the tomb. But you see, the Gospel of Barnabas has the incident of Joseph, but his name is Arimathea, not Arimathea. And it says in Barnabas 2:17, 8, but by means of Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea, they obtained from the governor the body to bury it. You know what's funny is there was a man named Nicodemus Bargarion. It was a real man. And he lived during the Roman and Jew War. See all these names? That is nothing but about the Roman and Jew Wars. And there's so much crap just messed up in this. That's why I say you must read the Roman Jew Wars, and you're going to see your players pop out left and right. You're going to go, whoa! It's almost like you can kind of see how things are shifted around and what the players are. Get your Roman and Jew War first, then get your Antiquities of the Jews. But in the Antiquities of the Jews, a big thick book by William Winston, they will have the Roman and Jew War in there as well. So I would suggest you just kind of put the Roman and Jew War book itself and then kind of look at it in the Antiquity of the Jew book, just to make sure they got it right, because they might have changed it too. Now, what the author's saying here is, he said, I propose that since none of the evangelists could have witnessed that scene, or even known the number of men crucified with Jesus, the story was made up from details found in Josephus. Yes, people, yes. How do we know there were 2 others with Jesus to make up the number 3? Where does this dramatic entrance of the previously unknown Joseph have its source? 3 were crucified and 1 lived. Josephus to the rescue. We have the desired incident, the right number, and the amazing survival of the one. The noted earlier, this incident is the only example in our histories of a man surviving crucifixion, and he is taken down from the cross upon the request of Joseph, not Joseph of Arimathea, but Joseph bar Mathia is the man. This is not to say that Jesus was not executed by the Romans, but merely that we cannot know the true details from the Gospels. That's true. The story was written many years after the event, and as usual, for dramatic effect, the synoptic writers turn to Josephus for a good story. Yes. Why 3 crucified? I've nowhere read that the Romans needed a quorum of 3 to make up a crucifixion. An old number, and the more the better, would do for an execution, while the number 3 was much used by inspired writers to make up a super number. But it does not stop there. In Luke, there is a bad thief and a good thief. The bad thief curses and taunts Jesus on the cross, and the good thief recognizes Jesus as the Christ and offers him paradise. You know the saying. A charming scene, but not probable. Later traditions from the 4th to the 6th centuries even supply the names of the thieves: Dryces, or Demas, and Gestus. Dryces is the good thief and Gestus the bad. That was in the Apocryphal New Testament, page 161 to 165. How funny. How funny is that we get the names of these thieves later. But we don't get them because you know why? If you go to your Catholic encyclopedia, it tells you in the Gospel section, go to Gospels, Synoptic Gospels, and it will tell you that the 4 Synoptic Gospels were not to the men that their names are on it. That those writings do not, I say do not, go back to the 1st century. They are from the 4th century. They can say what the hell they want to say. We all know it's a pack of lies. Now, but the story gets better as time goes on, and in the later Arabic infancy gospel, there are 2 thieves who hold up Joseph and Mary with the little infant Jesus on their way to Egypt, where they were fleeing Herod. Do you know, people, there was nowhere in Jewish history or literature where Herod was killing babies 2 and under, and if that was the case, then his quote-unquote cousin, which was a horse shit, would have been killed too. But the bad thief would rob and murder the Holy Family, but the good thief recognized the baby Jesus as being born of the Son of God and let them go free. In the Arabic Gospel, the good thief asked the infant Jesus not to forget his kind saying, "O most blessed of children, if ever there come a time for having mercy on me, then remember me and forget not this hour." Guess who the thieves on the 2 crosses were? Yes, the same 2 from the infancy gospel. The good one recognizes Jesus. By the same signs, he recognized him as the infant. It is then that he reminds Jesus and is consequently saved into paradise. So the story goes. Jesus and his family are saved by the good thief from the bad. And the resurrection. So he descended into the cave. For 2 days he continued in hiding. On the 3rd, his secret was revealed by a woman who had been with them. The death of Jesus was found to be a fiction, but it became known that he was alive. This is a description of a resurrection after 3 days in a cave. No, J is not Jesus, but Josephus. This is from the account of the fall of Jotapata, where Josephus hides in a cave for 3 days before he is found out by a captured woman who knew of their hiding place. He arose from the cave. After a short time, he ascended to the right hand of the Father, Vespasian the emperor, and Josephus went on to live in the mansion of his Lord. But finding every spot guarded on his account and no means of eluding detection, he descended again into the cave. So for 2 days he continued in hiding, and on the third his secret was betrayed by a woman who had been with them. The War of the Jews 3.8.1. But when time revealed the truth and all that had really happened at Jotapata, when the death of Josephus was found to be a fiction, it became known that he was alive in Roman hands. The demonstration of wrath at his still being alive were as loud as the former expressions of affection when he was believed to be dead. War of the Jews 3.9.6. The destruction of the temple, woe to the passages. According to Eusebius, that dirty dog of Caesarea, the bishop, the churchman of Constantine, said Josephus and others believed that the destruction of Judea was in divine retribution for the stoning of James the Just, the brother of someone called Jesus. The early church fathers, such as Origen, saw the destruction of the temple as retribution for the crucifixion of Jesus. The synoptic writers put the prophecies of this destruction into the mouth of Jesus some 30 or more years. But Josephus describes what happened as an eyewitness. This is in the War of the Jews 7.1.1. And it says, Caesar gave orders that they now should demolish the whole city and temple, and there was left nothing to make those that came thither believe it or had been inhabited. So, that's just some of the things I wanted to tell you there. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's very crucial and imperative that you get the Josephus War of the Jews and the Antiquities of the Jews. Read it, every page, line by line. This is another eye-opening discovery. You have to read books. You have to put things together. You have to see where things fit. And this church has messed us up. And you have got to come out of this. Until then, God Anubis and God Thoth and Goddess Bastet will continue to expose the darkness and bring truth and the light to all. And Nurse J says, Hotep and Ashe. We'll see you next time.